So what's up guys, I am Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to a Zombies Q&A on the channel, the series where I take your questions to do with the zombie storyline and Easter eggs and I answer them. So as always, if there's anything you want to know, leave your questions in the comment section below, and if you do go on to enjoy the video, hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already is always appreciated. But let's get straight into it then with the first question of the day from, this is a really long name, Garcia Inguez 1898. I tried my best, but you commented Ted being in the Dark Ether, okay, but how about Klaus, the cyborg that entered the Dark Ether in Berlin? So this was in regards to one of my previous videos where I spoke about how Ted has been salvaged from the Dark Ether by Weaver. You can see him on the back of this operator skin here. Ted was banished to the Dark Ether at the end of Black Ops 4, and because the Dark Ether still exists in Black Ops 6, things from within it are starting to leak out, or in this case, this operator has got into the Dark Ether and retrieved Ted's scrapped body. But what you're asking me here is, what about Klaus? Because in the Mauer der Toten ending cutscene in Cold War, we saw him pick up the nuclear warhead, walk through the portal into the Dark Ether and detonate it, closing off the rift, but also, we assumed, blowing up himself as well. And well, in Black Ops 6, Klaus is back as an operator, but he looks drastically different from the last time we saw him. His exoskeleton has kind of been blown to bits. He looks exactly how you would expect, detonating a bomb on himself. He's got flesh stuck to him, even though he's a robot. Reading Klaus's bio in Black Ops 6, it tells us he was constructed by Dr. Elizabeth Gray to be capable of both ranged and hand-to-hand combat. Though not intended for active duty by his creator, Klaus was nonetheless deployed in Berlin by the director of Requiem, where he would eventually come into contact once more with Dr. Gray and her associates during the events surrounding the release of The Forsaken. Klaus's program personality exhibits many traits of typical flesh and blood humans, but he appears to lack any understanding of their limits or fragility. We aren't told exactly how Klaus has escaped the Dark Ether, because that's what he's done. We are seeing a version of him after the events of Mauer der Toten, and that description that I've just read there tells you that. So when he detonated that nuke, it didn't fully destroy him, although it has done some damage. And it's interesting to see the internals of Klaus, because again, Klaus is simply supposed to be a robot, a very intelligent one, but still a robot. However, if you look at his internals, he has kind of a functioning heart. It looks like it anyway. He has flesh attached to him. It looks like Klaus is now half human, which makes me wonder if he was fully destroyed in the Dark Ether and someone in there put him back together using human body parts combined with his robotic skeleton and elements of the Dark Ether, perhaps Ethereum. In fact, the more I look at him and compare him to the last time we saw him, that's exactly what's happened. He's now got tubes coming from him, which he didn't have the last time we saw him. So someone within the Dark Ether has definitely put Klaus back together. They found him destroyed and have combined human parts along with other things to reconstruct him. But who that was and why, we don't know. Could it have been this Weaver operator skin? Did he go into the Dark Ether and whilst retrieving Ted, he also found Klaus and put him back together, allowing him to escape? I don't think it's really anything to look into. It's just an operator skin. But when Trott made him, they would have had their own storyline reasons behind it. I just don't think it's that important or affects the overall story. Salt Almighty says, hey, I have a question involving the blood writings found on Liberty Falls. Who exactly wrote them? It couldn't be Richtofen or Samantha, although some connections could be made to either of them. Whoever wrote the writings seems to know a lot, but do we ever get to learn about that person? So the thing is, with Liberty Falls, there is writing on the wall in blood in multiple locations, which really could be from anyone depending on which you're looking at. Janus employees, residents that lived in Liberty Falls, so it's really hard to say, but there is one that stands out, which is this right here in the spawn location where it says Eddie is a liar. Now, I have briefly touched on this before, but I want to elaborate on it because I saw someone point it out in a comment the other day. I should have screenshotted it. I've totally forgot who said it. However, if you are familiar with the COD Zombies storyline, you will know this is a reference to a older Easter egg that you could find in World at War Zombies maps in Black Ops 1, which said Teddy is a liar, referring to Richtofen, Teddy being his nickname. So this writing on the wall in BO6 is a throwback to that. Teddy is a liar, referring to Richtofen, and Eddie is a liar, also referring to Richtofen. But besides from it being a throwback Easter egg, there is more to this because there is only two people, I can remember anyway, that have referred to or still refer to Edward as Eddie, and that is Samantha and Kraft, which could suggest that it's either one of those two that wrote this writing on the wall in blood. It has to be someone that knows him and someone that's close to him, because I don't feel like a random person who barely knows Richtofen would refer to him as Eddie instead of Edward. That's a name that you would call him if you had some kind of relationship with him or you felt familiar with him. I mean, Eddie is just Edward shortened down, but you get what I mean. So for me, it narrows it down to Kraft or Samantha that's written this.
But we're in this together now, my Eddie and I. For better or for worse.
I don't think it's Kraft. Him being in Liberty Falls doesn't make sense in the storyline. The person writing this would have had to have been here, so it can't be him. And you could say the same for Samantha, actually. At this current point in time when this writing would have been written, which would have been on the day of the outbreak, which is also the day that we play the map a couple of hours before, Samantha is, let me change that, should be trapped within the Dark Ether. So how could she physically write this? She couldn't write. Get it? She couldn't write. But there is one other person, even though it's not a person, being Sam, the synaptic algorithm module, Samantha's AI based on her brain, who has also referred to Edward as Eddie. But how could AI, someone with no legs or arms, write something like this? They couldn't, so it can't be her either. But what I did find interesting is if you listen to this radio from the day in 1989 when Richtofen was programming Samantha's AI, if you pay close attention, you might notice something a little bit suspicious.
July 14, 1989. The time is 9:35 a.m. and I am going to attempt to synchronize the synaptic algorithm module's lower and higher functions for the first time. Commencing low-level startup procedures. How are you feeling, Sam?
Where am I?
Voice modulation will need to be modified. Recalibrate GPS. She shouldn't need to ask where she is. You are with friends. My name is Edward. You are my guest.
Good afternoon, Edward.
You just arrived. I'm looking forward to spending time together. Tell me, what do you remember before waking up?
I remember a knife. A promise I couldn't keep. A morning that would never come.
Do not worry. You are safe here.
Blood on my hands. But where are my hands? I don't understand.
Sam, those sound like nightmares. They are not real.
How? How do I know what's real and what isn't?
Because I will help you. Would you like that?
Yes, I would like that very much. Thank you, Eddie.
Richtofen programmed this AI version of Sam so that he could manipulate her memories. You can clearly hear that Sam doesn't know who Richtofen is. She says to him, "Where am I?" Richtofen says back, "You're with friends. My name is Edward. You are my guest." Sam then says to him, "Good afternoon, Edward." And then close to the end of their conversation, after Richtofen insists to help her regain her memories or learn who she really is, determine between what's real and what isn't, he's trying to manipulate her, but Sam finishes by saying to him, "Yes, I would like that very much. Thank you, Eddie." Even though this was supposed to be her first meeting with Richtofen, he introduced himself to her as Edward, yet seconds later she's referring to him as Eddie. And Eddie is the name that we have only ever heard, besides on Kraft, Samantha refer to him as, which could suggest she was either lying and hadn't been programmed correctly, because why would you call someone by a different name if you've just been introduced to them seconds ago? If someone comes up to you and they say, "Hi, I'm Edward," you say, "Hi, Edward," and then 10 seconds later you say, "Okay, bye, Eddie." It's not something you would do. So maybe she was lying, acting like she didn't know who Edward was, when really she did and slipped up calling him Eddie. Or maybe her memory was somehow still linked to Samantha in the Dark Ether, causing her to refer to him as she would, Eddie. There's definitely something going on with that, but just going back to the writing on the wall, that still doesn't bring us closer to finding out who wrote this. It couldn't have been AI Sam because it's AI, it's got no arms. It couldn't have been Samantha because she was in the Dark Ether. It couldn't have been Kraft because he was nowhere near Liberty Falls. Those are the only three characters that I've ever heard call Edward Eddie. As I said at the beginning of the question, it could have just been one of his employees who was pissed. It could have been Panos or even a character that we haven't heard of. I couldn't give you an exact answer because there isn't one. And the final question of the day from Tyler P. Kegger says, "The crew returning would explain how Sam was wearing a piece of each person's attire when she was rescued from the Dark Ether in Firebase Z." So I remember everybody bringing this up at the time of Firebase Z's release and when the Easter egg was completed. In that ending cutscene, you could see Samantha escaping the Dark Ether, and upon her return, she was wearing items of clothing that looked quite familiar to what we had seen other people wearing in the past. In the trailer, we see what she's wearing before entering the Dark Ether. Her attire is totally different. She was then captured by Dr. Peck on the orders of Richtofen and thrown into the Dark Ether. She was in there in our time for 3 days, in her time, because time in the Dark Ether works differently, for I think it was it 2 months, 3 months, something like that. But while she was in there, she was forced to fend off against the undead and all of the Dark Ether creatures within there, as well as survive, taking and using whatever she could find in there for herself. And so when she was finally rescued, we saw the items of clothing on her, the things that she had taken from her time within the Dark Ether, were suspicious to say the least. And the 3 items of clothing that people pointed out were the katana on her back, the goggles on her face, and the red scarf or handkerchief around her neck. All 3 of these items, according to the community, being references to characters of the past. The red scarf belonging to Dr. Monty, the goggles belonging to Nikolai, and the katana belonging to Takeo. But if you take a closer look and compare them, all 3 of these items are different. The goggles don't look exactly like the ones Nikolai wore. Takeo also wore some, but again, if you compare the 2, the ones Samantha has are different. So they're not Nikolai or Takeo's. Samantha didn't find them on one of their dead bodies in the Dark Ether and take them. Her katana is the most interesting out of all of them. Takeo actually had 2 different katanas. So in Black Ops 4, the katana special weapon, which was called the Path of Sorrows, the description for it read, carried by Takeo Masaki through both victory and sacrifice. The Path of Sorrows is a tragic blade with many more tales to tell, and you can see what that katana looks like. However, if you look at his in-game model, or where we've seen him in various cutscenes such as the Origins one, the katana that Takeo is holding here is different to the Path of Sorrows. Yet we were told in its description that was the sword he carried through victory and sacrifice, but in the cutscenes and in-game, his katana is different. It's not that one, and it is this one on his in-game model that looks extremely, but not exactly, familiar to the katana that Samantha has retrieved from the Dark Ether. I don't know the exact terminology of different parts, but the handle is identical. The pattern on the top part you can't really see from the gameplay here, but on the other side it's the exact same. The wrapping around the handle, and then this circular part here, I don't know what you'd call this, the base. Again, the patterns on it and the symbols are exactly the same as the one Samantha has. The only difference is on the one Takeo has, there are 2 of these kind of hooks, whereas on Samantha there is one. You could say that one of them is hiding behind this strap right here, but also the placement of these circular hooks is slightly different. On Takeo's it matches up with this dot right here, whereas on Samantha's it comes further down, and the colour is not the same as well. The hooks on Takeo's katana is more of a silver colour, whereas the ones on Maxus's are bronze. I find that weird because everything else is exactly the same as Takeo's, so why Trog would make those tiny alterations to it, I'm not sure. Either they would copy and paste everything, or just make it look like a totally different katana, but they don't. So I will admit that's weird, how the base, the handle, and we don't get to see the blade, but that could potentially be exactly the same as the one Takeo had, and it's just the, the cover that is slightly different. So this could be Takeo's katana, but I can't say it's exactly the same. And then finally, the red scarf around her neck is different to the one Dr. Monty wore. In fact, I wouldn't even really call this a scarf. It looks like just some random piece of material that she's wrapped around her. But I think Treyarch knew exactly what they were doing with this. They knew we would see all these items of clothing, make these connections, and say, hang on, has Samantha found potentially Dr. Monty's scarf in the Dark Ether? Because he was banished there at the end of Black Ops 4. His scarf would have been in there, so it wouldn't be impossible for Samantha to be able to find it if he dropped it, left it lying around. But like I said, everything she's wearing is not the exact same to any character that we've seen in the past. These just seem to be random things that she came across while she was in there. If Treyarch really wanted to, they could have made the goggles she's wearing the exact same as Nikolai's or the exact same as Takeo's, but they didn't. It would have been really easy for them to just port them over. It's the same for the katana, it's the same for Dr. Monty's scarf. They're different for a reason. It's because I don't think it's theirs. But I do think Treyarch wanted you, at least on first glances, to think that. So yeah, there we go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you've enjoyed the video today. If you have, drop a like rating. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Till then, goodbye.